Hi everyone, it's Katrina. It's time to check out some of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever. I'll be taking you to a mysterious mountain temple uncovered in the Thai jungle. I'll be showing you secrets of the Egyptian desert, and you'll even get to learn the bizarre history of golf. It's wild, so get ready. The Lost Thai Temple. In the lush Thai jungle, researchers came across a lost mountain temple. This holy sanctuary has been so completely swallowed by the jungle that no humans may have laid eyes upon it since the 6th century BC. The ruins are obviously from a grand structure. You can see how the bricks were stacked up to create walls, but nature has reclaimed nearly all of it. Roots eat through the stones like burrowing brown serpents. This temple has become one with the jungle, although the stones are still partly here. Dirt, shrubs, trees, and vines cover nearly every square inch of it. And there could be even more. A local historian said only 5% of the site has been explored. Foom and his team were the ones behind the discovery. They originally heard rumors of a ruin hidden deep in the jungle in 2017. But it was only recently that they were able to gather the funds to hack and slash their way to this ancient place. Now they are trying to figure out how big the temple complex is and just who in the world built it. There is one clue, a clue that comes in the form of the male reproductive organ. Hear me out. While exploring the ruins, Foom and his team came across an ancient phallic monument. It was a stone carved into the likeness of the reproductive organ, suggesting the temple was part of a religious cult focused on phallic worship. But there wasn't anything perverse about it. These types of cults were extremely popular throughout the ancient world because they were all about fertility and the creation of life. Many cults either focused on the male parts or the female parts, but the general idea was the same. There's nothing concrete about the temple in the jungle yet. Experts will still need to do a lot of work to properly date the ruin and learn its history. The giant sword. Archaeologists in Japan have discovered an unbelievable sword. I'm not even exaggerating. This sword is colossal. It looks like it should be wielded by an animated character with too many muscles. This sword is a whopping 7.6 feet long. It was discovered a few miles south of Kyoto in an ancient burial mound. Who in the world could have possibly been buried with a sword almost 8 feet long? Was it a giant? Was it a legendary warrior so big and beefy he wielded a sword the size of a tree trunk? The answer is a little less exciting, but still very interesting. The incredible sword is made of iron, so it was definitely heavy. It was crafted about 1500 years ago as a magical talisman. It wasn't used in physical combat, but rather placed inside the grave of someone important to protect them in the afterlife. As far as archaeologists are aware, this is the biggest sword ever found in the country. It might be the biggest sword ever found anywhere in the world, making it a priceless and exceptional artifact. It's slightly curved, kind of like a serpent. Researchers say the curve was on purpose, due to the sword's association with a serpent deity. These types of blades are known as Dakoken swords. Now that you know about the sword, let me fill you in on the burial mound. I'm going to keep peeling layers off, and they're going to keep getting more interesting. The sword was uncovered in the Tomio Maruyama burial mound, which dates to the 4th century AD, originating in the early stages of the Kofun period. This era in Japanese history stretched from 300 to 538 AD and saw substantial changes across the Japanese islands. Society changed, technology advanced, and the culture transformed. It was a big shift from primitive tribes to sophisticated civilizations. The Kofun period is most famous today for the incredible key-shaped burial mounds they left behind. The Tomio Maruyama burial mound is one of the biggest that has ever been excavated. Archaeologists have pulled a plethora of artifacts from inside, things like mirrors, artifacts decorated in images of gods and animals, and farming tools. But what about the owner of the sword? Japan has a unique method of preserving their history. Instead of digging up graves and pillaging tombs, like in so many other parts of the world, they generally leave them alone. Most of the Kofun burial mounds are still sealed because it's viewed as bad to disturb the rest of their ancestors. For that reason, the wooden coffin found buried with a gigantic sword remains sealed. Secrets of the Desert. Almost a century ago, in 1930, Egypt was occupied by Great Britain. It's difficult to think that this happened so recently, but it's true. With Egypt firmly in the grasp of Britain's military, British scientists were having a field day. Cartographers, surveyors, and adventurers explored the deepest reaches of Egypt that had remained relatively untouched. This exploration led to the discovery of something truly remarkable. In the 1930s, explorers heard whispers of a legendary place called the Zerzura Oasis. It was supposedly one of the most elusive oases in the Sahara Desert, and adventurers were desperate to find it. There are records of the oasis from the 13th century, ancient texts mentioning it as an old abandoned village. It had supposedly been a powerful city, its walls crafted of pale white stone. Oddly enough, ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote about a sparkling city in the desert west of the Nile that was completely white and bursting with treasure. Herodotus's account was written in 450 BC. In the 1930s, when these records came to light, adventurers were salivating. They were under the impression the lost city of the Zerzura Oasis was idling untouched somewhere deep in the desert, waiting to be found. To find this ancient place, an organization was formed known as the Zerzura Club. Forming clubs was extremely fashionable at the start of the 20th century, especially among explorers. The group of thrill-seekers traveled deep into southwestern Egypt, where they found no hint of a lost city. But they did discover something that took the scientific community by storm. They found a series of cave paintings dating back 9,000 years. The cave paintings were found in Gilf Kabir by the Zerzura Club. They didn't offer treasure of the physical kind, but did offer a revelation to scientists. The painted images were made by people in the Stone Age. They showed a landscape much different from the modern Sahara. The cave paintings made it seem as if the desert had once been green and lush, and filled with strange beasts. Scientists didn't know it then, but this would be some of the earliest proof that the Sahara used to be green. Not just green, but also populated by tribes of artistic cave people. Experts are still struggling to understand what happened to the Sahara that changed it so quickly from a green paradise to a desolate wasteland. And in case you were wondering, the answer is no. The mysterious lost city of the Zerzura Oasis has still never been found. And now for number 12. But first, it's shout-out time! I wanted to give a big thank you to Tony Brantley and Jessica Darnell for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about incredible archaeological discoveries. We've got a lot. Mysteries in an ancient Roman encampment. In the small town of Haltern in Germany, but close to the border of the Netherlands, archaeologists found the ruins of 2 small Roman temples. They also uncovered what appears to be a sacrificial pit near the temples. Although I call them ruins, there isn't much left of the buildings. Researchers were able to uncover their clay foundations, but absolutely nothing else. Still, a small amount of clay can reveal a large amount of information. It's believed the Roman temples were erected in the days of Caesar Augustus. He was the first emperor of Rome, founder of the Roman Empire. Between 31 BC and 14 AD, he brought changes to nearly every aspect of Roman life. What makes the discovery of these temples so extraordinary is that they were inside a Roman military installation. The temples were uncovered inside the borders of a Roman encampment far from Rome itself, way out in the lands dominated by barbarian tribes. Never before in history have religious temples been found inside a Roman military base. Although the Romans did have many mystery cults and an exciting religion with epic gods, they weren't zealots. Their military typically kept the gods out of their workings, which may have been one of the reasons they were so successful. Researchers are trying now to figure out why this particular camp hosted temples while no others did. Powerful stone armor. In 221 BC, Qin Shi Huang became the first emperor of unified China. He united China under a centralized government for the first time in its history. It was an extremely important event because it was what ultimately helped China form itself into a single nation. 2,200 years later, China is still one country. Qin Shi Huang also constructed the Great Wall of China to keep invaders out, and he may have died by drinking pure mercury in an attempt to gain immortality. Upon his death, he was buried in one of the biggest tomb complexes in the world, with his legendary Terracotta Army. You may have heard everything there is to know about the Terracotta Army already, so today I want to discuss something different, something that may come as a surprise. In 1998, archaeologists discovered 600 small limestone plates in the mausoleum. The plates were connected to one another using bronze wires. They were scales from a suit of armor. Imagine a leather suit of armor with all its folds and scales stitched together, only using solid limestone pieces. I bet you didn't think stone armor was real outside video games. In 2001, archaeologists found even more examples of stone armor near the mausoleum. They also discovered the tools that were used to make them. Scientists have continued to find random examples of stone armor in the area surrounding the emperor's grave. In 2019, archaeologists found even more sets of armor underneath a bush at the Liujiagu site in Xianyang, which was the original capital of China during the Qin dynasty. Did soldiers really wear this armor, or was it purely decorative? Experts aren't entirely sure. They believe metalworkers produced the armor in the same way they produced leather armor, which involved using casting molds. Researchers also learned that the raw material likely came from far away, meaning it was imported. Plus, the ruins of a stone armor workshop from 2,200 years ago was found, suggesting that stone armor experienced a surge in popularity. It was popular enough for a whole workshop to dedicate their time to it. Still, some experts think that stone armor was ineffective on the battlefield. It may have been for funerary purposes only. The oldest wine. Would you like to have a glass of bubbly from the oldest bottle of wine in the world? It sounds like a death sentence, right? Maybe not. Experts think that even though the oldest bottle of wine is over 1,693 years old, it's still drinkable. But where does one go about procuring a glass of the oldest wine ever? For the last century, the bottle of wine has been stored at the Historical Museum of the Palatinate in Germany. It's known as the Speyer wine bottle. Its handle's shaped like dolphins. Even the bottle is a work of art, likely because of who it was made for. The 1.5-liter bottle of wine was buried with a Roman nobleman and his wife near the town of Speyer around 325 AD. This was a serious power couple from the ancient world. So wealthy and prestigious, they were buried with enough wine to last them well into the afterlife. The tomb of the couple was excavated in 1867. There were a lot of other wine bottles found in the grave, but all of them were either shattered or empty. All except this one. All these years later, it remains tightly sealed. Archaeologists don't know precisely what the recipe was for making this wine, but they do have some realistic guesses. The wine was made using local grapes planted during Roman rule. There were likely herbs added and maybe some flavors and preservatives. And although you could probably drink the wine, it's not technically wine. It's more of a residue, like a slimy dark sludge of milky fluid. Still, the fluid is a miracle in itself. It only managed to survive as a fluid for this long because the Romans did an exceptional job keeping the wax seal airtight, preventing the ingredients from evaporating. The Cart Ruts of Malta. There is a mystery that spans the islands of Malta and Gozo in the Mediterranean Sea. Across these two islands, there are thousands of bizarre parallel lines cut deep into the natural stone. Scientists have been puzzling over the grooves for centuries. They look like cart tracks, like ruts made by wheels being dragged through mud and then fossilized. But it doesn't make any sense. Some of the tracks lead straight to a sheer cliff. Some continue directly into the ocean as if someone was pushing their cart down to the bottom of the sea. The best guess experts have to explain the thousands of crisscrossing tracks is that they were part of an ancient railway system. but there isn't any scientific way to confirm or even explain the guess. The ruts aren't even uniform, meaning that some are deeper than others. Some of the parallel grooves are almost 2 feet deep, with others only 6 inches deep. The only thing they all have in common is that they come in pairs. Each length of track is a pair of parallel lines, reminiscent of a cart, sled, or some other wheeled vehicle. The reason experts guess the ruts were part of an ancient railway system is their similarity to tracks at a modern rail station. Look at the haphazard way the tracks are at a normal train yard, tangled and disorienting. This is the same kind of pattern found on the island of Malta. It looks as if the island was some kind of railway station switching yard. And now, here's where things get truly crazy and make you question everything you know about reality. I already said how some of the tracks veer off cliffs and dip into the water. Well, similar tracks have been discovered across Europe, in Italy, Spain, and even Germany. What if Malta was some sort of ancient train yard, with the tracks leading to various destinations across Europe? There could have been a transportation network in the ancient world. But that's only speculation. Nobody even knows how old the ruts are, with guesses ranging from 4,000 years ago to 2,000 years ago. Some experts believe the ruts are the remains of a prehistoric irrigation system. They may have served an astronomical purpose. Like so many of the most incredible archaeological discoveries, nobody knows the answers to this mystery. Encrypted Runes. The runic writing systems of ancient Scandinavia are some of the most baffling writing systems ever used. Not a lot of people understand the true meaning of a rune. In essence, runes are just letters. Runes were the alphabet used by the Vikings 1,000 years ago. But there were different systems used by different people that make decoding runes especially difficult. Sometimes runes have double meanings as well. A rune can represent a sound and a word. In the runic system known as Elder Futhark, the rune for S also means sun. The reason I'm telling you about this is that scientists have just made a very interesting discovery. They found examples of runic writing from about 500 AD in Norway and Sweden. It proves the runic alphabet was used centuries before the Vikings. Up until now, historians believed runes didn't become popular until the beginning of the Viking era, around 800 AD. But by identifying these ancient runes, now it's clear that people in Scandinavia already had their own written language. Unfortunately, many runestones from Scandinavia are still impossible to read. For example, the rock runestone in Sweden. It was created 1,200 years ago and is covered in a lengthy runic text. Whatever is written on the stone could change everything historians know about the Vikings. But the text is encrypted, leaving experts stumped. Nobody has ever been able to decipher the text. Historian Sebastian Zimmerman from the University of Lorraine believes the Vikings encrypted their runestones on purpose. Scandinavians started tinkering with encryption long before the Vikings ever started pillaging. Prehistoric rituals. In a dried lake located in Poland, an archaeological investigation revealed over 550 ancient bronze artifacts. The artifacts belong to one of the biggest ritual deposits of metal ever found in Europe. Researchers believe the bronze treasures were thrown into the lake as offerings to gods about 3,200 years ago. The people doing the offering was a group only known as the Chelmno. If you haven't heard of the Chelmno group, don't feel bad, most people haven't. They were part of the larger Lusatian culture, which not many people have heard of either. These people thrived in Central Europe throughout the Bronze Age and into the Iron Age. They are famous among archaeologists today for their fascination with ritual deposition. I say fascinated, but it's more like they were obsessed. They were constantly tossing metal trinkets in the bodies of water as a way to appease their gods. What was the ritual importance of metal for ancient people in Central Europe? And for that matter, what were the names of the gods they seemed so keen on satisfying with their offerings? Nobody really has the answers to these questions. What the people of prehistoric Europe were up to is a lasting mystery archaeologists continue to struggle with. Along with the gorgeous bronze artifacts found on the dried lake bed were 33 skeletal remains. These may have been victims of sacrifice, but again, researchers just don't know. A shocking shipwreck. In 2014, an excavation beneath the waves of the Mediterranean Sea revealed something fantastic. Just off the coast of Turkey, a shipwreck from an estimated 4,000 years ago was found. Experts think it might be the oldest sunken ship anywhere on the planet. Being the oldest shipwreck ever is an impressive feat, especially when there are so many amazing ancient shipwrecks. If you try to Google the oldest shipwreck ever, you're going to get some conflicting results. You'll probably stumble upon the Uluburun wreck, which sank off the coast of Turkey 3,500 years ago. There is also the sunken ship of Hatshepsut, an Egyptian vessel that sank in the 18th dynasty 3,650 years ago. And then there is the Dokos shipwreck, the oldest confirmed underwater shipwreck known to science. The ship sank in the Aegean Sea at some point between 2700 and 2200 BC. At the minimum, it is 4,200 years old. This shipwreck was uncovered by American archaeologist Peter Throckmorton in 1975. The dating of the Dokos shipwreck came from scraps of pottery salvaged from its wreckage. Over 500 clay vessels were found from roughly 2200 BC. There were also bowls and other pieces of pottery that were likely being shipped as trading goods to somewhere. Archaeologists even discovered 2 gigantic boulders with holes drilled through them that were used as anchors. This was a merchant vessel that sank on its maritime shipping route at a time when there were still some people in the world living in caves. It's unclear, even 10 years later, approximately how old the shipwreck found in Turkey really is. The Urla port, near where the wreckage was found, dates to the 7th century BC. The coastal town was destroyed about 1,200 years ago by an earthquake, leaving many of its buildings and boats underwater. This wreck could be anywhere from 4,000 to 4,700 years old. The history of golf. This next topic of discussion isn't exactly a discovery, it's more of an infomercial. For those of you who have ever been curious about the history of golf, you're in for a real treat. Did you know that golf started roughly 800 years ago in the Netherlands? The topic of who came up with golf first is hugely contested among European nations. Scotland claims they were the ones who developed golf, but the records don't lie. At least they don't usually lie. There are documents from 1261 showing people in the Netherlands playing a game that looks suspiciously like golf. They hit small balls into small holes with long sticks. Flemish poet Jacob van Maerland famously described the game as using a kolf with a K to hit the balls. Golf, kolf. Over the centuries, the word and the game changed. It became kolf, but this time with a C. In 1360, Brussels banned the game from being played because it was so popular that it distracted people, allegedly. In 1650, Dutch settlers in the New World played the very first game of golf on American soil. It was such a popular game among colonists that in 1659, yet again, golf was banned from being played in the streets. There doesn't appear to be any way around it. Golf, or golf with a K, was the precursor to golf. But what about the Scots and their claim to fame? Scottish people claim they were the ones who created the game of golf centuries ago. They say it was Scottish sheep herders who came up with the game as a way to pass the time. They started hitting stones into rabbit holes using sticks, and as the years went by, it became a little more organized. In 1457, King James II of Scotland issued a royal decree banning golf. The king claimed that people were playing too much and weren't paying enough attention to their archery practice, which was necessary for defending Scotland. There might not be any way to say exactly who the first person was to hit a ball into a hole with a stick, but one thing that's for sure is that for the last 800 years, golf has been so popular, it's repeatedly been banned. Multiple kings of Scotland banned golf because it took up too much of people's time and wasn't profitable. Golf was banned in 1471 and 1491. Then, in the 16th century, it started to become popular among royalty. Mary, Queen of Scots, played a game of golf after her husband was murdered in 1567. Golf, starting with the peasants, the sheep herders, and the colonists, ultimately became a sport favored by the ultra-wealthy. Do you play golf? Does it take up too much of your time? Let me know in the comments. Missing fingers. There is something very strange about prehistoric cave art all over the world. Canadian scientists believe the evidence could point to an insane ritual. The ritual involved severing a finger to appease an angry god. Or perhaps people cut off their fingers so they could fit in socially. Either way, it's seriously weird. The Canadian scientists were led by Professor Mark Collard from Simon Fraser University. He and his team looked at paintings completed 25,000 years ago across France and Spain. Many of these cave paintings depict silhouettes of hands. Hand motifs were popular around much of the globe, from North America to Africa. But there is one aspect of the hand motif that has been missed by other researchers. Many of the handprints lack at least one finger, although sometimes more than one finger. In the past, historians and archaeologists assumed that people were missing fingers because they had accidents. Maybe they got frostbite and lost a finger. Maybe it was bitten off by a prehistoric creature. But according to Mark Collard, people were cutting their fingers off on purpose. The Stone Age painters likely had their digits amputated in a ritual to seek assistance from a supernatural entity. Nobody can say the name of the entity, nor what kind of assistance the Stone Age people wanted. However, so many hand motifs have been found with missing digits that it doesn't seem to be a coincidence. And before you ask, no, the fingers were not left out of the paintings on purpose. Most of these motifs were done using stencils or prints, in which the painter either traced their hand or placed their hand against the wall. The artists were definitely missing fingers. What's even more coincidental is that the phenomenon of amputating fingers is still happening today. The Dani woman of the New Guinea Highlands will cut off one or more of their fingers following the death of a beloved. If their son or daughter dies or their husband, they will amputate a finger as part of a funerary ritual. Mark Collard has found more than 100 instances in other societies of finger amputation. This could be a ritual that has been carried out since the extinction of Neanderthals. But why? The Chinchorro Mummies. The Atacama Desert in Chile is considered the driest place on Earth. It is a wasteland by every definition, totally incompatible with human life. Yet it was here, in this arid plain of dust and sand, that archaeologists uncovered mummies from 2,000 years before the first Egyptian mummy was made. These are the oldest mummified people in the world. The Chinchorro culture started mummifying their dead 7,000 years before today. According to Bernardo Arriaza, an anthropologist at the University of Tarapacá, the Chinchorro were the first people to inhabit northern Chile and South Peru, considered pioneers of the Atacama Desert. They were also the first known culture on this blue ball we call Earth to preserve their dead for eternity. But where did the Chinchorro come from, and who discovered all of their mummies? The first part of that question is still unknown. Evidence shows they arrived on the Pacific coast of Chile around 5450 BC. They continued to prosper for an astonishing 4,000 years or more, then disappeared without a trace. But where they came from is anybody's guess. As for who discovered their mummies, that isn't as simple of a question as you might think. The residents of the small Chilean town of Arica have always known about these mummies. Believe it or not, these ancient corpses are literally part of the town's foundation. When the first sewer pipes were being dug, workers kept revealing layers and layers of mummies. In 2004, during the preliminary excavations to build a hotel, workers revealed a solid layer of mummified remains less than 3 feet underground. The hotel was scrapped and the site was turned into a museum. There aren't just a few Chinchorro mummies. There are hundreds of them. Mummies of adults, infants, teenagers. All these people were mummified naturally because of the arsenic that appears in the soil. The very ingredient that helped preserve the mummies may have also contributed to an astonishingly high death rate. You may already know that arsenic is toxic. Having it in the soil where the Chinchorro lived led to countless health problems and a large number of miscarriages. The Chinchorro even painted themselves in death. They used naturally occurring manganese to paint their bodies for traditional purposes, but manganese is toxic and likely poisoned them. Today, the people of Arica are living on top of the mummified remains of their ancestors. It's highly unlikely that every last mummy has been found. Preserved bodies are likely beneath the foundations of homes and only inches below the city streets. Teenagers and chewing gum. If you've ever been annoyed by someone chewing gum, you may find some solace in the fact that people have been annoyed by gum chewers since the Stone Age. Researchers investigating the oral health of prehistoric teens did so by looking at their already chewed bubble gum. Well, it wasn't exactly bubble gum. Scientists launched an investigation into the oral habits and diets of Stone Age people by analyzing chewed plant resin. The resin was uncovered in Sweden, used by teenagers for mastication. They likely couldn't blow bubbles with it, but they still chewed it. However, scientists at Stockholm University think it may have had a more practical purpose. Teens may have chewed resin gum to turn it into glue, which was then used to make weapons and tools. However, that's only one theory. It's possible teens chewed gum because they liked it. Whatever their reason for chewing gum, the remains have proven hugely useful for modern scientists. The gum is packed full of human DNA. Inside the ancient resin are details about the environment and even the genome of the person who chewed it. For this study, researchers looked at 3 pieces of chewed resin from between 9,500 and 10,000 years ago. The resin came from birch bark, discovered at a prehistoric site near Sweden in the 1990s. All the pieces of resin were chewed by either children or teenagers. Researchers were able to look at the microbes in the resin to learn more about the mouth health of the teens. It turned out a lot of them had severe gum infections. This was most likely because Stone Age people used their teeth as tools, making it easier to acquire microbes. It is seriously amazing how much information can be extracted from a piece of prehistoric gum. Scientists also found bits of DNA from the animals that were consumed by the same people who were chewing the gum. DNA from deer, wolves, red and Arctic foxes, turtle doves, and brown trout. The Babylonian map of the world. If you've been here for the whole video today, you've seen a lot of very old things. The oldest wine bottle, the oldest shipwreck, and the oldest mummies. Now it's time for the oldest known map. It's called the Imago Mundi, and it dates back to the 5th century BC in Babylon. The incredible map was found in the ancient city of Sippar, Iraq. It isn't an unfolding map with detailed sketches of sea monsters and mountain ranges. The map was etched onto a clay tablet. 2,500 years ago, it was lost in the ruins of what archaeologists think was a hospital at the edge of the Euphrates River. The map shows just how small the world truly was at the dawn of civilization. At the center of the map is Babylon, presumed by whoever created the map to be the center of the world. It makes sense because Babylon was the center of life for the people of Mesopotamia. Maps from ancient Athens had Athens at the center of the world. This was a pretty common practice. Surrounding Babylon are 7 cities, including Urartu, Der, Beit Yakin, and Haban, to name a few. The map shows a swamp, some mountains in the distance, and a moat encircling it all that was likely a representation of the Salt Sea. Whoever drew this map may have thought Babylon and its sister cities were trapped in the center of an all-encompassing ocean that went on forever.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Ancient Roman Temple. Archaeologists have just discovered an ancient Roman temple complex in an unexpected place. In the Netherlands, they found a total of 2 temples used by Roman soldiers in the 1st century. At the time these temples were built, the Netherlands marked the northern boundary of the Roman Empire. The temples were found along the ancient Limes Germanicus, a series of outposts and military fortresses built along the edge of the empire as a kind of border wall. According to the Cultural Heritage Agency in the Netherlands, never before has such a complete complex been found in the country. Other than these structures themselves, archaeologists also uncovered various statues depicting ancient Roman gods. The soldiers stationed at this remote outpost likely used the temples as a place to bring offerings to whichever god or goddess they favored. Along with the statues were dozens of small stone altars, each one dedicated to a specific deity. Some people here venerated Hercules, some Jupiter, and some Mercury. The entire complex is evidence of religious fanaticism among Roman soldiers. Researchers found deep pits where the soldiers had gathered around fires and thrown in treasured belongings as sacrifices. Everything from their own weapons to pieces of their armor and even their horse harnesses. Evidence was also uncovered at the site that showed many of the soldiers were from as far away as Africa, suggesting the ranks were ethnically diverse. Buna Ayat. Hiding in the vast scrublands of northern Ethiopia is one of the strangest archaeological sites in the world. It is a cliff church that dates back an estimated 1,500 years and is still occupied to this day. There are at least 35 rock-cut churches spread throughout Ethiopia that we know of. Buna Ayat is by far the most famous and also one of the most treacherous. The only way to reach the church, assuming you don't live in the region, is to drive for hours through the desolate wasteland at the foot of the Simien Mountains. Then you have to hike up the side of a mountain to a dizzying height of 6,000 feet above sea level. And from there, you have to take off your shoes and scale the side of a rock crevice just to reach the precarious entrance into the church. Once you reach the top, you have to shimmy across a ledge no wider than the ledge outside a hotel window, and all the while with a sheer drop of almost 1,000 feet. Finally, you enter into the cavernous church of Buna Ayat. The church was supposedly carved by hand in the 5th century by Father Yamata, a local priest. He is one of the 9 saints of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but no one knows how he did it. This was 1,500 years ago, before machines or modern tools. All alone, Father Yamata somehow climbed that dangerous mountain every day, then carved out the church in the sky with the most basic tools. The whole place is also covered in vibrant paintings that look as though they had only been made a few years ago. Culver Hole. Culver Hole is a mysterious walled sea cave built around the 13th century AD. It's a strange archaeological site discovered in the United Kingdom, on the coast of Wales. It's not much more than a grotto, a small cavern against the sea built over 700 years ago. The wall has some windows for looking out and about 30 different levels of nesting boxes inside, which had most likely been used by pigeons in the medieval days. One of the interesting things about Culver Hole is that no one knows what its purpose was. The grotto was covered with the stone wall in a truly inhospitable place, where nobody could possibly want to live. Some legends say the wall was once part of a larger castle. Some say there is a secret tunnel connecting it to the nearby Port Ainon. However, one of the most likely scenarios is that the grotto was used specifically for farming pigeons or doves. Seabirds love to nest on rocky outcrops just like this. It appears that someone created the ultimate pigeon paradise inside the grotto, and they likely harvested the pigeons for their meat and their eggs. When local workers tried to repair some damage done to the ancient site in 2008, they found it extremely difficult because the tides made the work very dangerous. It really makes you wonder how the ancient people here built such an impressive pigeon house without being swept off to sea. Mystery Figurine. In 2020, a truck driver named Ronald was snorkeling in a marshy stream along Germany's Baltic coast when he found something unusual. He pulled out from the muck a small bronze figurine with a head shaped like an egg, knobby arms, and a gigantic nose. It turned out to be an extraordinarily rare artifact, the second one ever found in Germany, and the 13th found in the Baltic Sea since 1840. All 13 of the strange figurines are almost identical, and each one is a piece in an archaeological riddle that has yet to be solved. Oddly enough, there was once a massacre in the swamp where the most recent figurine was found. Skeletons were uncovered of men between the ages of 20 and 40 who had been bludgeoned or stabbed to death. Some had even been killed by arrows. These bodies date back to around 1250 BC. They were likely part of a large battle that unfolded over a single day. Scientists believe this is one of the oldest battlefields in Europe, with about 2,000 people involved in the conflict. That doesn't seem like much, but it was a lot for 3,000 years ago. But what does an ancient battlefield and a mysterious figurine with a large nose have in common? This is the unanswered question. Some have suggested the figurine could be a balance weight for an early measurement device. This would have been something used to measure material for trade or for early bartering. It may also be the representation of a goddess associated with trade and money. However, nobody knows why it was on the battlefield. The figurine could have nothing to do with the battle at all. Then again, it could have belonged to a merchant who found themselves sandwiched between two fighting armies. Whoops. And now for number 6. But first, it's shoutout time! Big thank you to Carrie Aubrey and Hugo Francisco for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join the Origins Explained family. We've got lots more videos like these coming up. Mysterious submerged structure. A mysterious, partially submerged tomb was recently found in Ireland. The structure was sighted on the eastern shore of Cork Harbour near Rostalin. The water level decreased slightly, revealing the ruined stones of a megalithic dolmen. It was made by stacking huge stones on top of each other to create a burial mound, one measuring 82 feet long. It was previously hidden underwater because the sea level has risen so much since prehistoric times. Archaeologist Michael Gibbons went to investigate the mysterious structure and discovered a burial cairn nearby, partially buried under the mud. The area where these things were uncovered is an estuary, a place where sea levels have been stable for at least the last 2,000 years. The tomb must have been built a very long time ago, though it's impossible to say exactly when. There were once megalithic stone tombs all around the Irish coast, but most have been washed away by the ocean. This particular kind of dolmen is called a portal tomb, and there are only 3 left in all of Ireland. We have no idea who was buried here. We also don't know why the prehistoric people of Ireland were obsessed with building burial tombs in muddy coastal plains. The Uxmal Stela. Researchers with the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico uncovered a massive Maya stele in the ancient city of Uxmal. Uxmal can be found in the Yucatan Peninsula. It's an incredible city which flourished from between roughly 600 to 900 AD, in what scientists call the Late Classic period. Maya legend tells us the city was originally founded in 500, but quickly became the seat of some of the most powerful families in Maya politics. Within this city is an architectural complex called El Palomar, or the Pigeon House. It was once a palace, but is now nothing but a ruin. Underneath the sunken patio inside the complex was where researchers found the stele, and it is quite impressive. The stele, a large slab of stone, was carved on both sides. One side has the image of a female deity holding a quetzal bird in her left hand and wearing a pectoral decorated in pearls. On the other side of the stone slab is a male deity. He is wearing a feathered headdress crafted from the head of an owl. He is also wearing a loincloth and a cape while brandishing a cane in his hand. Researchers believe the deities are meant to represent duality, good and evil, life and death, 2 sides of the same coin. However, nobody is exactly sure which deities were carved on the stone slab. The Griffin Warrior. Near the ancient city of Pylos in Greece, archaeologists uncovered a shaft tomb from the Bronze Age, dating to roughly 1450 BC. Inside the tomb was the body of a man known only as the Griffin Warrior. During the first 6 months that University of Cincinnati researchers excavated the tomb, they found 1,400 objects. Things like jewels, gold artifacts, skillfully forged weapons, and pieces of armor. Since then, that number has risen to 3,500 objects. The Griffin Warrior may have been a real legendary hero, like a living Hercules. No one has ever been able to properly identify him or learn his name. However, he was buried with more riches than most kings or queens from ancient Greece. Analysis of his skeleton showed that he was around 30 years old when he died, and that he stood roughly 5 feet tall. Despite his small stature by today's standards, he was a very robust man, and he was almost certainly a dangerous warrior. His is one of the richest tombs ever found in Greece, yet the man's life and prestige are a total mystery. The Dead Sea Scrolls. One of the most important discoveries of the 20th century was that of the Dead Sea Scrolls. To put it as simply as possible, finding the Dead Sea Scrolls was like finding the unpublished version of the original Bible. The fragments found in the Dead Sea in Israel, discovered by chance by a couple of sheep herders in 1946, are ancient Jewish manuscripts. They now consist of some of the only surviving biblical documents before the year 100. These scrolls have given scientists and scholars unparalleled insight of real events that happened 2,000 years ago. They have also brought to light some forbidden biblical stories that you won't find in any modern Bible. For example, the Book of Giants and many of the secretive apocryphal books. These scrolls were found throughout the Qumran caves. The scroll fragments were buried inside pieces of pottery left in the dark by Jewish scholars 2 millennia ago. The oldest copy of the Book of Isaiah was found, written on 17 pieces of parchment. The Genesis Apocryphon, a conversation between Lamech and Noah, and so much more. The books were written by a secret group called the Essenes, who wrote in Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and Nabatean. Scholars aren't sure why they buried so many biblical texts in pots in a series of cliff caves. One of the best reasons anyone can think of is that the Essenes were afraid the knowledge would be lost forever, and so they hid it in the caves like time capsules. If that's true, it worked, because the knowledge was protected until modern times when it was rediscovered. New Mexican Mammoths. 37,000 years ago in New Mexico, a mammoth and her baby were killed by humans. This information comes from old mammoth bones uncovered at a butchering site and studied by scientists with the University of Texas. There is no denying that humans butchered these mammoths almost 40,000 years ago, then broke down the carcasses and rendered the fat over a cook fire. The thing that's really crazy is the date, because according to mainstream scientists, humans didn't arrive in New Mexico for tens of thousands of years later. The conventional thought up until now has been that humans weren't in North America until about 16,000 years ago, and yet humans butchered and killed this mammoth and her calf much, much earlier. The bones were found on a man's property in 2013. Marks on the bones show irrefutable proof of human intervention. The university scientists also found evidence of controlled burns near the bones, further proof of human activity. This seemingly ordinary discovery is going to change the history books. It is further evidence that human beings have been in North America much longer than anyone ever realized. They were hunting, living, and spreading. Roman Observation Tower. The Roman city of Volubilis is an ancient place located in modern-day Morocco. Not long ago, archaeologists here uncovered a Roman military observation tower. It was built after the fall of Carthage and the Roman victory at the end of the Third Punic War in 146 BC. Following the death of Carthage, the Kingdom of Mauritania emerged and stretched their arms from Algeria to the Atlantic Ocean. And while they were more or less an independent nation, they were also a client state of the Roman Republic. They were allowed to keep their culture and laws, but they had to do what Rome told them to do. In the year 44, Emperor Claudius annexed the Kingdom of Mauritania and it became a province in the Roman Empire. The city of Volubilis quickly became a very important center for trade. It exported local commodities like olive oil and unique animals. Within a century, the city was bursting at the seams with over 20,000 residents. And here in this ancient city, archaeologists just found a massive tower dating to around the 3rd century AD. They uncovered its foundations, the remains of a staircase, and some fragments of cobblestone. Otherwise, the tower was utterly obliterated. Absolutely nothing of it remains except a few inches of rubble, and so we can't say for sure how large it was. However, the structure did contain Roman military items like javelins and legionnaire belts. The tower was almost certainly destroyed when the city was ransacked by local tribes in 285 and then abandoned for 700 years. Ötzi's Arrow. In 1991, a couple of tourists in the Ötztal Alps, located along the border of Austria and Italy, made one of the greatest discoveries in human history. These tourists found a real frozen caveman. They came across the ancient body of a man who had been stuck in a block of ice in the mountains for over 5,000 years. It took the world by storm and is still one of the most shocking discoveries ever made. The caveman was given the name Ötzi, and he died around the year 3105 BC. That makes him the oldest natural human mummy in Europe and one of the most studied human specimens in history. Scientists know that Ötzi died from wounds he sustained in what may have been a fight with another prehistoric man. He had an arrowhead embedded in his shoulder and had several other injuries as well. He was also covered in tattoos, which came as a huge shock to researchers. However, the most recent discovery has more to do with his weapons. Marcus Kleck, an expert in ancient technology, recreated the quiver that was found along with the caveman's frozen body. By doing this, he found that making equipment 5,000 years ago was not as easy as previously thought. The quiver, a primitive bag used for holding arrows, was made from the hide of a roe deer. The hide was treated with smoke, minerals, and clay, and was likely layered with animal and vegetable fats. This was a complex process using a large number of treatments just to get a quality finished product. It shows that humans 5,000 years ago were already a lot more sophisticated than many people realize. Titanic mystery solved. During the 2022 Titanic expedition, a mystery that started 26 years ago was finally solved. It all began when Titanic diver P.H. Nargiolet detected a blip on his sonar in 1996. He was diving near the wreckage of the Titanic and picked up something large and strange on his sonar system. But there was no way for him to figure out what it was. He simply didn't have the time to go poking around through the dark. And so, for 26 years, everyone has wondered what the structure on the radar was. Some guessed it was another sunken ship, which would have been sensational if correct, but others thought it could have been nothing more than a boring geological feature. In 2022, we finally figured it out. Members of OceanGate expeditions, joined by P.H. Nargiolet, identified the sonar blip. It wasn't a sunken ship, but a basalt volcanic formation. And while that might seem pretty boring to some, it proved to be a mind-blowing discovery for the scientists. The volcanic ridge is home to corals, sponges, and all kinds of mysterious life forms. It's an undersea garden 9,500 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. It's also 330 feet long, a basalt landscape filled with diverse marine organisms. Not far from where the rotting Titanic sits on the seafloor is a lush underwater ecosystem, the Shroud of Turin. Secured within the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, located in the town of Turin, Italy, lies one of the most important holy artifacts in the world. It's called the Shroud of Turin, and it's little more than a piece of cloth. However, burned into the cloth appears to be the image of a man who looks an awful lot like Jesus Christ. As legend has it, the shroud was used as the burial cloth for Christ after he was crucified. When Christ died, the cloth was wrapped around his face as a kind of burial blanket, and then he vanished from his grave after he was resurrected. All that remained was the cloth, with the image of his face imprinted on it. The cloth has always been a major point of controversy because it's so difficult to prove it as legitimate. It wasn't even mentioned until 1354, then was denounced by the Bishop of Troyes as a fake. Neither the Catholic Church nor the Vatican currently endorses the shroud as real, although they haven't denounced it either. It's been kept in the Royal Chapel of St. John for almost 500 years. In more recent years, modern science has been very useful. Italian scientist Liberato De Caro tested the shroud in 2022 and discovered that it is indeed 2,000 years old. This contradicts the first carbon dating done in 1988 that declared the cloth to be only 700 years old. This means that if correct, the cloth does date back to the time of Jesus Christ's death in the 1st century AD. Even more shocking is that De Caro identified pollen from the Middle East on the cloth, specifically from the region of ancient Palestine. If the shroud was a fake from Europe, there seems to be no reasonable way it would have gotten Palestinian pollen embedded in its fabric. What do you think? Is it real or fake? Let me know in the comments below. Fox domestication. Throughout the last decade, archaeologists have made some unusual discoveries involving foxes. They have found evidence that foxes hung around prehistoric human settlements, suggesting they were either pets of early humans or that they lived around camps hoping to get food. But what it really looks like is that thousands of years ago, humans managed to domesticate foxes and keep them as pets, just like we do with dogs and cats today. The most recent discovery came from Spain, when archaeologists uncovered foxes and humans buried in the same graveyard. This was at the prehistoric site of Can Roqueta in Mallorca. The primitive society here practiced agriculture 4,000 years ago, growing things like barley and legumes. They also took care of livestock and ate a healthy diet of meat and plants. When researchers were analyzing bones pulled out of the burial site, they were shocked to find so many fox remains. The scientists were intrigued by this, so they analyzed the fox bones to identify their diet. They discovered that the foxes had a very similar diet to what the humans at the site were eating, suggesting they were sharing food. This isn't the only time evidence of fox domestication has come up either. Burials in Switzerland and Germany from 15,000 years ago have revealed fox bones as well. The same thing has been found in the Levant. What all of these discoveries point to is the human domestication of foxes. If you lived in prehistoric Europe, you may have had a fox as a pet instead of a dog. The Thein eruption. An archaeologist from Cornell University recently determined what he believes is close to the exact date of the Thein eruption from the Holocene epoch. The Thein eruption, also called the Minoan eruption, was a catastrophic event in the Mediterranean. This incident caused the destruction of the Minoan city of Akrotiri and decimated various nearby settlements and cities, many of which were located on the Greek islands. The volcanic eruption caused earthquakes and tsunamis, erasing entire civilizations and bringing the ancient world to its knees. It's believed that this eruption was one of the greatest volcanic events in human history. It likely plunged the world into darkness and anarchy for years. However, one thing nobody's ever been able to determine is the exact date of the disaster. But Professor of Archaeology Sturt Manning used cutting-edge statistical analysis, and he now believes the eruption happened sometime between 1609 and 1560 BC. He's revealed this timeline to the world with a 95.4% probability. There's still a window of about 50 years, but this is the closest anyone has ever come to an exact date. This is a big deal because it proves some things and disproves others. For example, it's been believed that the Thein eruption was directly responsible for the destruction of many palaces and cities along Mediterranean coastlines. And while that's partly true, the eruption happened before many places were destroyed. This means there was another cataclysm 3,500 years ago that we still don't know about. This newly discovered disaster was just as devastating as a volcanic eruption. It brought ruin to the Mediterranean civilizations of the Bronze Age, and we still have no idea what it was. Primordial life. In 2022, researchers from Indiana made a shocking discovery about primordial life. A team of chemists from Purdue University found what they've described as a mechanism, one which they say could explain how life first took form in our distant past. The chemists believe this mechanism has the capability to produce building blocks of life from inorganic matter within the ocean. According to researchers, this mechanism introduced the first microorganisms to the planet roughly 3.7 billion years ago. Every living thing on Earth can be traced back to the primordial soup that formed at the beginning of our planet's life. However, scientists have never really known how that life started, seeing as the planet was little more than a big piece of space rock. For example, how could ordinary compounds in the ancient ocean, things like water, gas, and rock, create something that's alive? The answer, according to the Purdue University chemists, is sea spray. They believe that when a wave hits the rocky shoreline and explodes in a foamy mess of sea spray and air bubbles, life is likely to take shape. Scientists identified a unique chemical reaction within sea spray that creates peptides out of free amino acids. In the simplest terms possible, sea spray can create the necessary biological mixture for tiny microorganisms to be born. And so, everything on Earth likely evolved from the water splashing against the rocks. Humans and Neanderthals. Some new and very interesting information about the relationship between humans and Neanderthals has been revealed by researchers from Leiden University in the Netherlands. Igor Jakovic and his colleagues collected DNA samples from 28 Neanderthal bones and 28 modern human bones. These remains were taken from 17 different sites throughout France and northern Spain. Researchers then put this information into a computer program to see when exactly the two species came into contact with each other. The results are shocking. Researchers found that modern humans arrived in the region of Western Europe approximately 42,500 years ago. They also found that Neanderthals disappeared from the same region about 40,457 years ago. Based on their findings, they concluded that for roughly 2,000 years, humans and Neanderthals coexisted in the same place. But things get even more shocking from here. Researchers now believe that during those 1,400 years, Neanderthals were slowly absorbed into the human population. It's not that humans made the Neanderthals go extinct, but that we may have assimilated them instead. The two different species certainly mixed, and there is a strong possibility that they mixed so well that the Neanderthals basically just faded away over the years. Blue-eyed humans. Research from 2008 has revealed that every single person on the planet with blue eyes shares a single common ancestor. A research team from the University of Copenhagen tracked the genetic mutation responsible for blue eyes back to one person who lived between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago. It doesn't matter what color of skin a person has, what color their hair is, or where in the world they originate from. If they have blue eyes, they are all technically related. Every blue-eyed man and woman can trace their lineage back to a single person. Professor Hans Eiberg says originally all humans had brown eyes, but then there was a genetic mutation which affected the OCA2 gene in our chromosomes. This resulted in a switch, changing the P protein that gives color to our eyes, hair, and skin. The change basically limits the P protein's ability to produce brown eyes by reducing the amount of melanin in the iris. This switch effectively forced brown eyes to dilute into blue eyes. A very slight change in the melanin level in the iris, the only thing that makes eyes a different color, is why we have people with blue eyes today. Professor Eiberg and his team looked at the mitochondrial DNA from people all around the world with blue eyes. His research has been ongoing since 1996, when he first discovered the gene responsible for eye color. He was able to match the DNA and trace it back to a single ancestor who suffered the mutation in their OCA2 gene, diluting brown to blue. This individual passed their mutation on to their children, and the mutation has since spread across the entire world. Grand Canyon fossil tracks. In 2016, geology professor Alan Krill from Norway was hiking with his students in the Grand Canyon when he found something amazing. Lying next to the trail, in full view of everyone, was a boulder with some strange markings on it. Being a geology professor, Alan recognized fossilized footprints when he saw them. He took a photo of the rock that had fallen off the cliff and sent it to a colleague at the University of Nevada. It took a few years of investigating, but we now know exactly what these mysterious footprints are. They are currently the oldest vertebrate tracks found within the Grand Canyon, and some of the oldest tracks found anywhere in the world of an animal that lays eggs. Amazingly, Alan and his students discovered the earliest evidence of any vertebrate walking across sand dunes. Researchers have dated the tracks to be about 313 million years old. The ancient footprints record the movements of two separate animals crossing over a sand dune millions of years before the dinosaurs ever existed. Whatever these animals were, they walked just like cats and dogs, but they were most likely some kind of mysterious reptile. We don't know what the species was, only that these creatures lived a very, very long time ago. They were alive back when the Grand Canyon was covered in sand dunes, just like the Sahara Desert is now. Lost trading ship. Patrick Ford from Baton Rouge was hunting for artifacts in the Mississippi River in 2022 when he came upon a shipwreck from the 19th century. It was discovered due to the incredibly low water level of the river. Patrick had been observing the retreating water for weeks, and then one day the ship was just there. The entire shore had washed away, and there was a ship sitting in the middle of the river that had been there for at least 100 years. Patrick reached out to Mississippi State archaeologist Chip McGimsey, who was nice enough to identify the ship and solve the mystery. Chip says the wreckage belongs to the Brook Hill, built in Indiana in 1896 as a trading vessel. But on the night of September 29, 1915, there was a huge storm. Both the Brook Hill and its sister ship, the Ostruma, were destroyed and sank in the Mississippi River. Nobody saw the Brook Hill again until low water levels exposed it in 1992. But back then, it was still buried in a lot of mud, and it would take a lot of digging to even get a glimpse of the boat. When the river dried this time, so did the mud, and the ship was more clearly exposed. Further studies are now being carried out on the vessel to discover what secrets it holds. With 55% of the contiguous United States currently in drought, it's prime time for river scavengers like Patrick to discover more lost pieces of American history. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye!